The Heritage Minister oversaw the negotiations with Google for the government, and Minister Pascale St-Onge is with me now. Hi, Minister. Good to see you. Thank you for making the time.
Hi, thanks for having me.
When this bill was designed, Minister, there were two companies that it applied to based on the criteria set out, Google and Meta. You made a deal now with Google that essentially means the law doesn't apply as you intended it, and Meta is not paying for news, it's blocking it. So what was the point of Bill C-18 at all?
Well, as we know, those digital platforms have been in Canada and around the world for more than a decade, and it does take legislation, or at least a promise that a country will legislate for them to start making deals with newsrooms, even though they've been profiting off of newsrooms for more than a decade. So yes, bringing forward the legislation is necessary. This is a historic moment in Canada. We now have a transparent deal where we know that Google will be compensating newsrooms in Canada for $100 million per year, adjusted to the inflation. And if ever we know that there's a better deal elsewhere in the world, we will renegotiate that one.
Just to be clear, though, Minister, there were separate side deals that Google did have with some newsrooms, and Meta did too, which they've now canceled. Am I to interpret from what you just said that the bill as you introduced it, or the legislation or the law, was primarily purposeful because it forced them to do that? It's sort of the threat of it is more important than the actual application of it?
No, both is really important because the Google and Facebook started negotiating some deals with some news outlets of their choice when they heard and when they were made aware that the government was going to move forward with legislation. What we're seeing is too often that's the case.
And I certainly want to ask you about how the money kind of will break down in that respect. But I just want to challenge you respectfully one more time on how far this bill actually got the government and these news organizations. Because at the outset, Google said, hey, we're willing to go as far as $100 million. The numbers the federal government put on the table included $172 million initially, $150 at one point, $215 at one point. And then the PBO, the budget watchdog, said, actually, if you compare what Australia was able to get, we should be entitled to $329 million. This doesn't even come close to that. It didn't go further than what Google had already offered.
Well, actually, the amount that got negotiated in Australia is not known in details. And also what we've set upon with Google is $100 million in monetary value, but Google is still providing more value to the market because they are making available some very useful tools that I hear a lot of news outlets also use. So it's actually more than $100 million that our news sector will get, but what we've secured in the regulation is the monetary part of it. And the rest, the collective that will be representing all the news outlets in Canada will be able to negotiate all the non-monetary compensation, and that could bring the amount much higher than $100 million in total.
It could, or it will, and how much higher?
It will, because Google is already providing tools to some of the news outlets that are using them, but they will most likely make it available to all.
But how much extra money is that? And I'm just asking, I'm not trying to be glib. I was looking through a lot of the reaction from organizations, for example, Friends of Canadian Broadcasting. A lot of these organizations expressing relief that there is some sort of agreement, but then saying it will not deliver the kind of support, quote unquote, we originally hoped for. I think the anticipation had been that your government would be able to push Google further than it was willing to go. But at the end of the day, your bill and all that ensued since got them back to what they originally offered.
Yeah, well, it's money that is secured for years to come that will be also adjusted to inflation, which means that our news sector won't lose value on that part. Also, like I said, if ever there's a better deal that is struck elsewhere in the world, we will reopen that agreement and we will renegotiate so that our news outlets are treated equally. But this is the first time that a government has succeeded in passing a legislation and having a transparent bill that, like I said, will bring around the table not only our biggest news outlets, but also our independent ones and local journalism, which is so important to communities around the country. So yes, yes, of course, like everyone else, we would have liked to have more money than the $100 million, but this is a great step. This is money that doesn't exist right now in the system, and we've left the door open to get a better one if ever some other countries succeed in doing that.
As far as how the money will be divided among companies, there is a concern that's being voiced that because the formula looks to be based on the number of full-time employees, that bigger broadcasters and not smaller independent publishers and print outlets will be the bigger benefactors of the deal. How far are you willing to go to address that?
Well, everything will be made public when the final regulations are published, and that's going to be a few days before the law comes into power, which is on December 19. But what I can say is that there's a few things that we need to consider. First of all, this deal is about Google, so a digital platform. So of course, what we're considering is the content that does bring value to Google. So it's mostly news that we find on the internet. So this is really important to put into consideration. So we're trying to make sure that we're helping as much as we can.
What does that mean, though, about what we can expect? And I understand you don't want to divulge the exact details of the regulations before they're released, but can we anticipate from your comments that there will be augmentation to the idea that this will solely be based on the number of full-time employees?
Well, this is already the case, but like I said, we're considering the fact that this is about a value exchange between a digital platform and our news sector. So it's journalists that provide content for the internet. And it's also, the rest of the regulation, when it's made public, will be clearer for the public. And I understand that this is a little bit cryptic, but we've considered what's going on in the market right now, the fact that the private sector is having a lot of difficulty. There's still a lot to be done, but this is another very important piece of the puzzle to try to make sure that we still have news across the country.
Just before I let you go, Minister, I wanted to ask you about the prospects for a deal with Meta. And more specifically, I remember reading a Reuters report not long, I think about a month after the bill became law, in which the data that they had collected showed that Meta's decision to block Canadian news in response to your legislation had almost no impact on Canadians' usage of Facebook. Do I equate from that your government has really no leverage with Facebook, with Meta?
Well, we're still looking at everything that we can do to try to bring Meta back at the table. And of course, my door is always open. And there's also legal action that was taken by the broadcasters at the Competition Bureau. So we'll see where that lands. But what I can say is that Meta, yes, decided to ban news in Canada, but we're seeing that they're doing this across the world. This looks also like a business decision from Mark Zuckerberg to leave their platform to disinformation and misinformation. And I think that the public should be very worried about that.
But your bill did nothing to force them to do anything differently, and it hasn't hurt their bottom line. Does that can we interpret from that the bill, again, was not effective in the way that you told Canadians it would be?
Well, we passed the bill because it's important that platforms makes money off of Canadian content should compensate the newsrooms that create that content. Meta took a bad decision, in my opinion. Their platform would be much better with news on it, and this is the decision that Google made also to, yes, even though they would have liked better if there was no legislation in Canada and to continue business as it was before, they decided to comply with the legislation and have those conversations with the news sector. Meta should do the same thing.
Okay, Minister, I'll leave it there. I'm out of time. I appreciate your time today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too.